So at this point, Spike's giving you something different to do each time, but this time you got Richard Price that you're working with. And that
Yeah,
dialogue in that scene was juicy. That was good stuff. So how do how do you play with that kind of thing? Because that's word for word rhythm. That's written on the page, right?
it is. It is written on the page, but what's not on the page is are the rhythms and the various human dynamics that make up who this human being is. And with Clockers, I was very fortunate because the first time that I met Richard and I had lunch together, and Richard told me that I had read the book once. Clockers is based on his novel Clockers, which I had read. I met with Richard, and Richard told me that the character of Rodney that I was playing was based on a real person. And I said, "Oh." And he said, "Yeah, the cat lives in Jersey City." I said, "Oh, well, can you introduce me to him?" Which Richard did. I then, prior to filming, hung out with this dude. I hung out with this cat for probably 3 weeks or so in Jersey City, talking, observing him, watching him, just taking in everything about who this man, or trying to take in everything about who this man was and what made this man tick, why he did what he did. And there were a couple things that I observed. Incredible sense of humor this man had. Were it not for that little problem of what he did for a living, a very enterprising, engaging human being. And all of those things were very, very valuable for me because, in actuality, playing Rodney, the fact of Rodney being a drug dealer was probably the least interesting aspect of who Rodney was. And what interested me was getting to the heart of his relationship with those young people, why he has the relationship that he has, how and why does this person become the father figure that he becomes. So those kinds of characteristics were really interesting to me, and I kind of logged them into my computer and hopefully could then connect those kinds of small human details to my presentation of Rodney in the film.
He was really paternal, but he also had a kind of a vicious side
No
that would
question.
come out. He was
No question.
scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't think of him as scary, and I know that there's the. I don't think you're going to show it in a clip of this, but there's a scene in which Strike and I are in a car together, and I ended up putting a gun into Strike's mouth and admonishing him never to speak to me in the way that he has spoken to me. And somebody asked me about that scene once. My God, that was scary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what I said to the gentleman, I said, well, what the scene was about for me was a father admonishing his son to conduct himself in a certain way. That's what the scene was about for me. So the viciousness, the violence, the psychological and even the physical violence comes out of this feeling that Rodney has that he needs to, in this moment, admonish his son to comport himself in a certain way. That's what the scene was about for me.
So when you get into Barry Sonnenfeld's hilarious Get Shorter, you're dealing with another great writer, Elmore Leonard, obviously,
Yeah.
but you're
Yes.
also working in a comedy with this extraordinary ensemble of actors, including John Travolta. I mean, that must have just been fun, or was it? What was it like for you to work on a
It
comedy?
was it was phenomenal. One of the biggest challenges that I had in making that work, being a part of that film. I remember Barry said to me when he and I first met, he said, just keep talking. When you start to talk, just keep talking, no pauses, just keep talking. And that was somewhat challenging for me. But that contributed to the rhythm ultimately of who this character that I was playing. And as you say, we had this extraordinary material. It was brilliantly written, brilliantly adapted
Scott Frank,
from
right? The guy who did Queen's
Frank,
Gambit. Yeah.
Scott Frank, brilliantly adapted from Dutch Leonard's novel.
Yeah, no, so that's such a great scene. So what let us so one of the questions I had, working in Hollywood movies, I mean, one of the great challenges of the character actor is being able to come in and nail something in a short amount of time without being, on screen for the whole thing. And it's actually a skill. It's not easy to do. How did you tackle that challenge?
Um, excuse me, that goes back to my theater work, my training as an actor, and the fact that I worked as long as I did in the theater. And in the time, in the 10 years essentially that I worked as a theater actor, I developed for myself an ethic, a work ethic, a way of working that I stick to. And I bring that ethic developed in the theater to my work for the camera. And there are some things that do not change no matter which medium I'm working in. So I attribute, to your question, I attribute the things that I learned in the theater and the ethic, the work ethic that I developed in the theater to what I bring to my work for the camera.
So when you're in a big hit like Get Shorty, does that translate into more offers? Does that give you a career boost?
Yes, ish. It does, but I say ish because when one is in a big hit, as a character actor, invariably what happens is the people who are perceived as being responsible for the success of the film are the stars of the film. And broadly speaking, for me in my career, yes, it did translate into more work, but to the extent that I was, the people felt that the producers, studios felt that I was responsible for the success of a given film, that happened less for me.
Right. Um, let's look at these clips from Soul of the Game and
Oh,
Feeling Minnesota.
oh, great. Mm-hmm.